Hey everybody, welcome to Coffee and Open Source. I'm super excited for today's conversation, so let's just get right into it. I got my coffee, let's go. Today my guest is Jerome Hardaway. Jerome, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, my name is Jerome Hardaway. I am a DevRel at Quicken Loans by day, and at night I am the executive director of Vetsu Code. What I do is I help veterans get into the software industry by teaching them how to write software remotely for free, with a heavy focus on JavaScript.
No, that's awesome. So I want to get into that conversation for sure because I think that's a part of the reason why I found you is the Vets Who Code thing. I think it's an amazing concept, and I'd love to talk about that more. I want to take excuse me a step back and kind of talk about how you got started in open source, right? Like, do you remember the first time open source or you came in contact with open source?
The first time I came in contact with open source, well, a very funny story because this comes like full circle, was with the Slick Loader on online. I was trying to find a way to make a slideshow or carousel, and the Slick carousel was my first time, reaching into open source. And I was trying to use it. I was brand spanking new, had no idea what I was doing, and I was like, okay, let me, ask a question. And I found Ken Wheeler. Back this was before this was I guess BS before Slack, right? And we were able to chat a little bit, and he helped me with like this dude was like all this open source cred, and he's building this product. He built this product that millions of developers are using, and he sat down. He just talked to me, and without making checking my my street cred in tech and things of that nature. He helped me with Slick Carousel, and now like the guy, he just this is his. I think he's been aboard for like 6, 7 months. He actually took a board position on Vetsu Code this year. So it's kind of crazy how like he doesn't even remember that moment. He's like, wow, like that happened. Like I did that so often that you know people tell me about this stuff, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know. So yeah, that was my first moment with open source, and I really saw, you know, its power, particularly in the front end in the JavaScript world. Like I've always, because I'm from the military, I've always looked for that community that was most like the military, where they're hands-on, get stuff done mentality, wanting to help my fellow person, right? Before and not wanting to come off like I'm the smartest person in the room. My Going back to Ken, he says, highbrow, right? Where we're trying to have this form or this falsehood of elitism, right? In the end, we push pixels for a living. We have the coolest jobs because it's stressful, but it's nowhere near the stress level of being in Iraq with 120-pound gear and 110-degree heat with people trying to kill you. So, like, when you put that in perspective of like what the most stressful jobs in the world is, like what we do is pretty cool, pretty fun, even at its highest levels, right? Um, it's totally different with us because we can quantify our, even if you like work at a company, a fame company, you can quantify your value in dollars, but it's a whole nother stress level when you quantify your value in lives, like how many people have you saved, how many people got made it back home, things of that nature. So I was looking for that type of community. And front end was what really stuck out to me because they, of all the communities that was out there, they were the least most like jerks. I was like, yeah, that and the Ruby community because they were just like chill. I like who's that? There's that movie where they're bowling, and there's the dude that is like has the beard and like messy hair. I can't remember. Like he's it's an iconic movie.
Like
Like
You talking about Big Lebowski?
yeah, Big
Yeah.
Lebowski.
Okay.
Yeah, that guy. He's like every Rubius I've met. Like there's for the most part, Rubius are super chill, and I deal with that. Like I can deal with that. So um, that's why I just like open source in those communities. Like
Yeah.
front end was like front end to me still I have yet to find And like I said, I'm coming from a Ruby background, so when I say this, I'm like not coming from bias because Ruby was my first love, and I
Sure.
still enjoy Ruby and Ruby on Rails. But I've yet to find a community better than most the majority of the front end communities that I've seen. Like even in Nashville, we have Nash.js, and we're doing some things with Underground JS. Like you know, there's no community out there that just jumps in head first and want to help. And there's the egos are minimal. No one wants to be like, oh, I'm the professor of this. Everybody just wants to, everybody just wants to help each other
Yeah.
and build dope things, right? And I can get behind that 100%.
No, that's awesome. Like what's telling to me. So let me just ask you a quick question and before I kind of go into my diatribe, right? So did you have like a relationship with technology when you were a kid, or did you come to technology kind of after, when you were an adult? And there's a reason why I
And
asked this.
100% tech, like after an adult, like the
Yeah.
closest relationship I had with technology post when I was a child was playing video games.
Yeah.
And I wasn't, well, like I said, I was in combat sports. Like I started martial arts and boxing and kickboxing from a very young age. And I was on the competitive circuit for that. So, yeah, I was not learning anything
Yeah.
about software engineering or like code or tech, which I feel like that stuff kind of really helped me in
Sure.
the end because I'm accustomed, like, everybody thinks that boxing and like Muay Thai and wrestling and stuff is all about, teamwork and sparring and drills. But a lot of the work that you do is solitary. Like a lot of the strength and conditioning and like the road work, like, I was 14, 15 years old getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and going running 5 miles Monday through Saturday on my own. Like parents, like I think that's like the early 2000s. Like because I would like literally be livid if one of my kids woke up and decided they were going to go
Yeah.
for a 5
No.
mile. I would lose my mind.
Things are definitely changed in that percent as it pertains to parenting for sure. I think
Yeah,
one of the things that's really interesting. So I talk to people about like how they've gone into tech a lot, right? And a lot of people, their story is very similar. Like, oh, I was always somebody that played around with technology. Like I took apart remote control cars or VCRs or whatever, and then my parents got a computer and I couldn't get around it. And your story is different because you come from a different, I guess you could say, mindset, right? Like you said that you were very athletic, you were very kind of, and then you went into the military, right? I'm guessing you went
yeah,
right out of high school.
yes,
Yeah,
right after I graduated. Yeah.
yeah, and then afterwards, you kind of you're introduced to it and you fall in love, and it's as an adult, which
Yeah, it was after. I mean, not only it was a little bit of love, a little bit of like survival, right?
yeah,
For me, technology and we have this very like technology in general I learned as like trying to during transition from the military. I got
sure,
out the military in 2000, at the very end of 2009, like literally I was doing my separation, my separation, I guess I'll use the word vacation here, like my last days, in 2009, but my DD 214 says 2010, right? So and I get out during the recession where all my skills, I was security forces. So I had law enforcement, I had security, I had all this like top secret clearance. I was thinking I was going to be okay, but they were essentially useless until like outside of like either becoming a cop. Couldn't become a cop because local governments weren't hiring. Becoming a federal agent, couldn't become a federal agent because federal government wasn't hiring. Or going back to Iraq and Afghanistan as a private military contractor. Didn't want to do that,
sure,
and or working $9 an hour for Home Depot. So as a security guard. So like these were all of my options when I got out, right? And I was like, I don't like any of those. None of this is a vibe. So I was like, all right, so what do I do? And I happened to see a commercial about software engineering and coding. And I was like, what is this about? And I started doing research and realized that, a lot of coders, were doing just fine during the recession. Like it was not, you had Elon Musk complaining for losing $1 million, but he had like 3 million left. Bill Gates was losing money, but he already had FU money, right? So like these guys, they weren't following. They were, it was like a little stumble, like they tripped, but they were all right, and they're still all right, as you see, right? They're making gobs of money, like in the era of the COVID apocalypse, as I'm calling it. So yeah, so I was like, you know what? I want to be like these guys when I grow up. I do not want to be worried about what I'm going to do or how to do it. Like I want to skill. So I went to the library. I went to the library and I was looking at books. They were ultra old. So I went to Barnes and Noble, picked up a book on SQL or SQL, however you want to call it. Don't care. And I taught myself how to handle databases in SQL. And I ended up getting a job, ironically, with the government 6 months later on Department of Homeland Security because lo and behold, like, oh, that's a job that they needed, right? Tech jobs were always in abundance, even in the government. So my first job was a government job. I learned to like handle databases. My job was essentially using the background checks that they already had and like building these digital dossiers as a SQL analyst or a database analyst, as you say. I'm building these dossiers for people with their background checks, putting all this information together to give them either approve or deny their access to our nation's waterways. Right? It was the TWIC program, Trusted Worker Credentials. Um, so that's what I was doing. Well, afterwards, I moved to Memphis to help family and ended up getting a digital marketing job at a nonprofit. But I was never like because I was like 25 at the time. What happens is, oh, you're young, fix the website. I was like, that had absolutely nothing to do with my job.
Yeah.
But here I am learning to fix the website. That was my first time being introduced to PHP, my first time hating PHP. Um,
First and
yeah.
not last, probably, right?
Oh yeah. Definitely first and not last.
Yeah.
And as a result, like that was like what I did, right? That's my life, of my whole thing, right? Let me learn how to do this PHP. Let me push. Let me push. Let me push. And within a year, I mean, within 3 months, I had like this really nice website, right? And by the end of the year, I had 3 versions of the website, right? And I was like, oh snap, I do this. I can do this. But what really like bit like the bug that really bit me was the front end because it was like those people were nice. It was the forward like it felt like the elite gate guard because in the end no one really cared
Sure.
about the code. Everybody cared about was it fast and was it
Yeah.
pretty and did it look good on a cell phone. So which is to this day what all people care about,
Yeah,
right?
right. Gotta
No
have the
one
responsive design. Have to have it.
it's very funny when people talk about big O and linked lists and stuff. So like the person that's gonna actually spend money on this doesn't really give a crap about
Yeah.
any of
Well,
this.
to an extent, right? I guess my always response. First before I make the statement, I totally agree with you. People only care about what it looks like, except for when it's slow.
Yeah, I'm saying they care about it being the 3 things they care about is speed,
Yeah.
prettiness, right? I mean, and like, is it fast? Does it look good? How does it work? And does it work well on my cell phone? Right? Those are 3 things everybody cares
Yeah.
about.
That's
Like a
that's why
hundred
my entire
percent.
career I've tried as hard as possible to stay away from it because I don't have a right side of my brain. I guess like if somebody gives me like a wireframe, I can build exactly to that wireframe. But deciding on what looks good and what doesn't, I just don't have that. It hurts
See,
me in my personal life because my wife will say, "Hey, do I look good in this?" And I'm like, "Well, you look good in everything." And then she's like, "That's not an answer.
ooh,
That's
that
not an
is not
answer."
an answer. Don't
Yeah.
ever.
So
Ooh,
yeah, but
what is he doing?
yeah,
I would not. No. You need more guy friends. You'd be like, nah, don't. That's the wrong answer.
I mean, I think I've done pretty well, so I can't really complain. But
You've been like, she's like, oh, poor little. She's like, just taking your
she's
hit.
very
You're like,
patient. She's very
yeah,
patient.
she's very forgiving. Like my
Yeah,
wife would not let that slide. She'd be like, What, like, did you just all lives matter my outfit?
Oh
Like,
no, all lives matter.
like, yeah, she would go in on me. Like, she was
All
straight
right.
roast
Well,
me.
now I can't because now whenever I'm glad
Whenever
I'm
you
just
say
being
that, you don't
like
think
all
that.
lives matter my outfit. That's brilliant. Um,
Yeah. Oh,
awesome.
she's quick.
So it seems to me like you definitely gravitated towards, like you mentioned PHP and you mentioned Ruby. Like you definitely like you were introduced to those scripting type of languages, right?
Yeah.
So did you ever work with C++ or Java or .NET or anything in any capacity?
Legit first time touching .NET was this year. I am not enjoying it at all. Like a -5 is what I rank
All
it.
right.
I'm trying to teach myself. I actually have I play with Python, like Python.
Yeah.
Try to teach myself C. Like it's just every time I mess with it, I'm like, nah, this is not the language for me. And every year, I was like, no, this is the year I'm going to at least try to learn a low level programming language. I'm going to learn C. I'm going to teach myself C. And I have the book over
Yeah.
here. It's Learn C the Hard Way by Z.A. Shaw. And it's right there. I can literally make eye contact. It's never far away from the computer. It's just two
Yeah.
steps away. And it's just like, nah, I'm not going to do that.
I mean,
Like,
I think it. So one, I've tried similar things. I've tried to learn languages throughout my life, and what I found out is that if I have no interest, then it's not worth it. Like, because what I always end up doing. So like, I tried really really hard to learn Go last year, and because everybody was talking about Go and whatever, so I'm like, I got to give this thing a try. And like, I immediately, so I have a bias, right? Like, I'm a .NET developer, and when I started learning Go, I'm like, well, this is way easier to do in .NET. Every time I had to do anything, I imagine you run into similar things when you try to do things, and then you're like, oh, this is so much easier in JavaScript. And I found out that you kind of have to give yourself a task. Like the books are great, but you have to like one things that I've done is okay, I'm gonna build like I'll come up with an idea for an app, and I say, but I'm gonna write it. I could write it in .NET in like 2 days, but I'm gonna write it in a different language. So like that's how I learned React. That's how I learned Angular, and that's how I learned Python, and like that's helped. But there's some times where I'm just like, no, I don't enjoy. I'm not enjoying this at
and
all.
that's where it came from. Like I like learning Ruby. I enjoy PHP. I did not enjoy Angular. Like I'm from React land, so I learned. I've done a lot of studying of Angular. I just didn't enjoy it. And same way with C. I just don't enjoy. And similarly with .NET, I don't enjoy the process of building it. Like it's just like
Right. So I've
I'm
been
very happy about the stack I'm super excited for right now in this era is like Jamstack
yeah.
because like the technologies that they're using and the things they're doing, they're just making like it feels like how Ruby was when they were talking about developer happiness, right? It's like, oh, we just want to make the developer happy. We just want you guys to be able to make cool
Yeah.
things on the web, right? It's like back when GeoCities and MySpace was around all over again, man.
All right. Real question. So you and I are a similar age, right? So MySpace was a thing, and then Facebook became a thing, right? So
Yeah.
were you that person that like had their like really tricked out MySpace page, like with all of like the crazy stuff, and like sometimes it would crash your browser if you open the MySpace page.
Yes, but because I was
Oh, all right.
bored and like I was like 19 when I was doing 18, 19, but I was like the last, like it was, I just wanted a MySpace page and I
Yeah.
was bored in South Korea. It was my first year in the military. You can do everything in South Korea in like 3 months, right? So, especially if you arrive in the summer, you're like right before monsoon season, like you can do everything. If you arrive, like, if you go to, if you go to, I was in Kunsan, I got there in March. By June, I had done everything. I went to Seoul. I went to Jeju Island. I did everything, right? So I had nothing else to do. So I was just playing around doing goofy stuff on my MySpace in order to stay in contact with my high school friends from back home, right? Because that was the only way back then. Like Skype was not as good as it is now. Like phone calls international was like, oh my goodness. So like, and like I only really called back home to like with my mom,
Yeah.
because if I didn't, she would call. She called the commander on me once because
Oh,
I she
okay.
hadn't heard from me. Yeah, so I got an order to call. I was in Garden Mountain, and someone's like, "Hey, yo, call your mom," and I was like, "What? Yes,
Yeah.
sir." They're like, "Yeah, the commander ended up getting a message like your mom hasn't heard from you in like 3 months." So like that was like
Very
embarrassing.
challenging being an adult when mom doesn't want you to be an adult, right?
Yeah, especially in another country. Mom's not ready for you. Mom was ready for me to leave, but I was already gone. Um, so yeah, that's when I was learning and playing around with MySpace, and I had actually learned a little bit of HTML, CSS enough to like add graphics and do
Yeah.
and make my web page crash because what the internet just wasn't as good as it is now.
Well, yeah, I just remember MySpace. Like, it was very cool. Like, and then people found out that you could just add custom CSS and JavaScript to it. And, like, some page, like, all I want to do is, like, just check out your page. And you couldn't even, like, figure out what was going on because there's, like, butterflies and flying stuff. And then when,
Yo, those pages are my thing. I love those pages. Like, yo,
oh,
like you spend a lot of time on this. You got music playing. I don't know where that
yeah.
music's playing from.
Yeah,
I
like,
love
where's
it.
the mute button? I don't know where the mute button is.
I
And then when
absolutely love
Facebook
it.
came out, so Facebook originally came out as like a college only thing, and it was
Yeah.
my freshman year of college, and I remember like this my friend was like, there's this thing called the Facebook, and I go to it and I'm like, this is nothing like MySpace. This is amazing. Like it's because I was very tired of because I think Facebook it
People
turned
are
into like people just trying to troll, and then it ended up being that Facebook turned into the same thing. But like I'm not going to talk about social medias because social medias is not a great conversation. What I do want to talk about is you. So you've made two comments now about .NET, right?
Mhm.
And so I think you and I have very differing opinions on .NET, and
Well, that's what
I would
makes
like to
it.
have a discussion about it because one of the reasons why I was introduced to you is you ran for the board of the .NET Foundation, which I'm a
Yeah.
member of. I participate in some of the committees, and I love .NET, and I think the
Yeah.
.NET Foundation is interesting. And I'd like to know, as somebody who's not a .NET developer, obviously, I think you mentioned in your one of the interviews you did for the foundation that you were asked to do it. I'm curious to know, even though you were asked, why you still said okay.
Because this sale of it was, we need people like you. Just,
Yeah,
for those of you guys who don't know me, in the JavaScript world, I've done some pretty cool things,
yeah,
especially with handling the stigmas of tech and bringing people from underrepresented communities in tech, whether they're veterans, Black, Latinx, it doesn't matter. I help people, and with JavaScript is my, as I like to say, is my Captain America shield. If you can see that,
yeah,
I always get one near me. Uh, so I had like 250 people, 37 states, all have 252. Sorry, and they all have jobs in tech, writing software for a living, and they do not come from the engineering world
yeah,
that people are accustomed to, right? These are guys and girls who are tankers. I have a UX designer right now, Erin. She used to be EOD, right? So she, going from bombs to UX, right? And I help herald people from crazy lifestyles like that, and
yeah,
she's so cool. Like, she talks about colors and accessibility, and she's so passionate about accessibility. And then you'll see her on Instagram yelling at her kids' jujitsu matches, well, before the world closed.
yeah,
So it was like, oh, this is amazing. Like the duality of humanity, and like just how complex humans are. It's beautiful. But yeah, so I was asked to run for it, and I was like, I don't know. I'm not a big fan. I was open. I was upfront. I was like, I'm not a fan. I don't write .NET.
hmm
Have zero intention to write .NET. If I can avoid it, I'll do it. Um, And I'm like, I'm not even a part of that community like that. And they're like, well, that's why they need an
Yeah.
outsider. She was like, they need an outsider. They need somebody who has boots on the ground, who has done the work. A lot of people come in based on what the work they've done in the community, based upon being 20 years of working in the community. And you're not like that. You're a person
Yeah.
who came from the military into the community, and you immediately started impacting the community. Like, you've been in the game for less than 10 years, and the like impact you've had is greater than people who have been in the community for 20,
Sure.
right? And I was like, oh, those points are true. And like, so, and she's like, what we need, like, a lot of the things that keep you away from joining .net are the things that we actually need.
Sure.
So I was like, okay, I'll run. And I
Yeah.
said yes. And I was like, I'm gonna lose this. It's like, it's gonna be okay though.
You were
But yeah,
close.
like that,
You were very close.
yeah. And that was crazy to me. I was like, so I was like, maybe that message resonated with people within the community, but like, I thought it was crazy. Oh, someone named Isaac is hitting us up on Twitch. Oh no, you're Isaac. That's right.
That's me.
Yeah, I was like, what's going on? Yeah, so it was just a weird thing, right? Like, just to even get that close, I was like, I
Yeah.
can't believe that I'm
And let
like
me.
in the top 10
Yeah.
or
So let
top
me.
15, I think.
Yeah. Let me just tell you. So I voted for you. Full disclosure. I voted for you.
That's wild.
And let me tell you why. Because it's like, and first off, this isn't a .NET show, but I feel like this is a very interesting topic in the open source world, right? So I've been a .NET developer since high school, right? So we're looking at, I graduated high school in '04, so it's been 15 years of being a .NET developer. And I think one of the things that .NET, to your point, is there's been like a very typical .NET developer, what they look like. And I think that has turned into this thing where there's this stigma that .NET is for old white guys, right? And I think that that isn't true. And I think one of the reasons why people don't see that it isn't true is because the people that are always talking about .NET are old white guys. Even though there's things that are in the .NET space, like you mentioned Jamstack, like there are .NET tools to write Jamstack. Like there's .NET tools to do all sorts of crazy things, and nobody knows about it outside of the .NET community because they think the .NET community is not for them. So back to why I voted for you. I feel that you don't have any bias. So when it comes to .NET, you could easily have a discussion and say, I don't think that's a good idea because that's not how we do it, or that's not how it's done with other things, other frameworks, other tools, other languages. I think that's very important. I'm not saying that I'm not happy with the choice of the board, but I think that you would have been an excellent member of the board. And I think the reason why, yeah,
That's where I differentiate. I think I would have, like, just coming from internally with my own experiences that I'm having currently with people who have bought in with the .NET
sure,
communities. First and foremost, everybody who is a big .NET dev is an old white guy that I'm dealing with,
yeah.
right?
I mean,
And secondly, like, they all have such heavy buy-in and they're so staunchly embedded into this
sure,
stack that any idea beyond the idea of what they're comfortable with or what they've been championing for the past, you're dealing with 20 years, right?
sure,
And here's this
yeah,
dude that's been in the game 6 7, and you're like, and people look at that, right? Especially in the .NET community, right? They look at, oh, 20 years, 3 books, and I'm like, yeah, but your books kind of put me to sleep, and there's just nothing uh, there's just nothing about this that makes me, who, like, I'm not a spring chicken, but I'm not an old man either, right?
sure.
So
And,
so like,
and
if I'm 34 and like I'm looking for the next level of enterprise, and your stack is what most is like a big part of enterprise tech,
sure,
and it's the main reason why I kind of don't want to make that jump from small teams to enterprise, then we have a problem, right? Like Angular and .NET are the two things that keep most people from wanting to move into enterprise tech because their communities are really like just really structured in a manner that it doesn't feel like innovation,
Sure.
right? It doesn't feel like the engineering mindset is up front and center. So when we think about it, when we do that, it's like, man, how do we make this how do we make this better? And I never see that being asked in the .NET community. How do we make people not shiver when they think about us? Like, how do we make it I come from doing things, fun and fast, and I feel, when I think of .NET, I feel like it's the death of fun and fast. It's the death of innovation. It's like, it feels like getting married, it's feel like being married for 20 years, right? Like, I need someone to be smart to a spark, right? It's not like that fun honeymoon phase.
Sure.
I feel like the first 3 to 5 years of JavaScript was just fun. It was exciting, wheeling and
Yeah.
dealing, like all types of wild stuff. Like, I don't know, it's like a whirlwind romance, and like .NET feels like, oh, like the kids are left and we're not hanging out with each other, right?
Sure.
So, like, how do we solve that? And when I deal with people who are in the .NET community, it seems like they're happy or they're content with it. It's putting food on the table. It's helping with the give them the lifestyle they want, and that's pretty much where it stops, right? Well, if it ain't
Sure.
broke, don't fix it, right? But as Grace Hopper said, Admiral Grace Hopper, let's put it in that way. Give her
Yeah.
give her the respect that she's due. The most dangerous thing to do is we've always done it this way,
Sure.
but I don't feel like the .NET community as a whole has gotten there on that, right? And it's really dangerous saying this that we've always done it that way. Like,
Sure.
you may disagree because that's your thought process,
Oh, for
but
sure.
the people who I interact with who are also in that community, I'm not seeing that same style of the engineering mindset. So that's one thing that I was like, maybe I can help with, but then I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, they're pretty resistant to that,
I
right?
mean, so you say you have a couple of really good points, right? I am I'm not old, but I'm definitely an old white guy, right? Like in the way you want to frame it, I'm gonna be a .NET developer in 10 years, and then I'll officially be like an old white guy. But so my thought to when and I've had this discussion with a lot of folks about when you compare the JavaScript community versus the .NET community, like one is like wrought with innovation and new things and cutting edge, and the other is like what enterprises do, right? And when I had this discussion with people, the first thing that I always ask them is, have you looked at .NET in the last 3 years? And the reason why I ask that is because, yeah, so .NET's been around for 20 years, right? 20 something years. And there was a long amount of time where there wasn't a lot of innovation. Like, sure, like new tech came out and new things and Visual Studio and whatever, right? But now, with .NET Core and leaving to .NET 5, there is substantial work being done to make things interesting. And I'm just going to give you a practical example, right? So there's this technology that's a part of .NET called Blazor, which you're nodding your head, so I'm not going to teach you about it. I'm not going to mansplain Blazor to you because I think you probably get it. But one of the things that's really interesting about Blazor is that, for instance, you can write a Blazor application that literally compiles down to JavaScript, right? So you transpiles down to JavaScript, I guess you could say. And you can deploy it to any static hosting solution. And then you have an API somewhere, whether it be like Azure Functions or Lambda or whatever, and then you have kind of what you want when you're talking about Jamstack, right? The markdown's not there, but there are tools that will let you do markdown stuff. And you write all of the code in C#, right? And then it compiles down into JavaScript so it can run anywhere. It doesn't need a server. So that's one interesting thing. And I think there's lots of other interesting things like in the mobile space, and I don't want to just sell .NET to you because it's silly, but I think that there's there's innovation happening in .NET, and what I think what the main issue that people have when they say, "Oh, .NET doesn't have a lot of innovation," is because they see that it's enterprisey, and then they see what most typical .NET sites look like, right? They, yeah,
I disagree with that. First, I have been following .NET in the community for the last 3 years because, like I said, Scott Hanselman is one of my boys. Like, so I have to,
it's hard not to
it's
like Scott. I'm
yeah,
friends with
it's very
Scott. It's hard not to
disrespectful to
like him.
like be a fan of
Yeah,
somebody and then be like, oh well, I'm not gonna like try to give your stuff a chance. So
yeah,
I watch his videos and
yeah,
like he's so on fire about it. But once again, old white guy, all right. So
yeah,
been doing in the game 20 years. So no matter how much I love him, it's like, and then maybe that's the problem. Like, here's the issue: .NET has antiquation baked into the community, not
yeah,
into the
yeah.
tech,
It's very
right?
true.
Let's look at it like that. Like, it's not the first part of not having antiquation or not having that stigma of antiquation built in is stop putting old white guys in the camera and stop putting old white dudes on the stage, right?
Sure.
Like, what happened with Java, one of the things that made me excited to even think about Java is Angie, right? You have
Sure.
this Java
Yeah.
champion who out here, she follows up Jack Dorsey and she's dancing on stage. And I'm like, yo, like she's like all the
Yeah.
way live, right? And she knows how to, she's injected energy into a community that's much you know,
Oh yeah.
like .NET. You're like, okay, yeah, but who do I want to be like in this community? Who do I actually, I call it the 8 hour rule. I tell my troops, like, you want to be the person who gets the best work done, and at the end of 8 hours, no one wants to throw you out a window, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's how I look at it. Like, who are the people that I would want to talk about stuff beyond tech with? Like, who are the people I want to talk about UFC fights with, right? Like, it's wild, coronavirus going on. This dude bought an island, and now it's like Mortal Kombat. No one's saying anything.
Oh,
Like, I can't have that conversation at work because I'm like, I don't really want to talk to any of you guys about
I
it,
don't want
right?
to talk about the
Yeah,
island, right? It's so silly.
yeah, that's
No.
so odd, that's so wild, right?
Yeah.
But so like that's the thing, right? And in the JavaScript world, like people like Brandon Ike, this is not a young language, right?
Yeah.
But the innovation is being allowed to come from young people, and there's no real. I mean, when it comes to youth, there's not a or we don't use years in the game as a gatekeeper, right? I think that's the
Yes.
one thing that JavaScript does. Like
Yes.
JavaScript has a lot of the same problems that other communities use, but .NET uses years in the game as
It's very
a like
yeah.
as a gatekeeper within its own, right? And that's just always going to be a problem. If you use years, like great story, a great example, I think we were talking about this early, Facebook, right? The
Yeah.
stories, right? They found that they were losing teens, losing young people on it. And this 18-year-old just started at Facebook. He was on Snapchat all the time. And he was telling them, well, this is how we interact and stuff. And he sat down and he pitched an idea, didn't know that Mark was going to be in the meeting. And Mark's in the meeting, and they give him a team to roll out this feature. 18. Could
Yeah.
you imagine being 18, given the power to roll out a feature on Facebook?
Yeah. No, it's
That's
crazy. It's
insane.
crazy.
.NET isn't doing that. .NET is like .NET isn't doing that, and they're not sick. All right, how about this? If they are doing it, they're not signal boosting it.
Sure. So I'm gonna do a broad brush, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm sorry if this comes off as a broad brush to anybody listening or to you, but like, so I think one of your concerns, like to be one of the things like the years, like I like how everybody always says, yeah, I've been a .NET developer for 20 years. Like that's like their everybody's intro. That's a problem. I totally agree with that. The broad brush is you see there's not a lot of people that look like you. There's not a lot of black people that are talking about .NET, right?
No,
Yeah,
not just that. There's just not enough. Like, I think Julie is the first woman I've ever met talk about .NET and be excited about it in my life. There's just not enough like, there's not enough like reflection and culture period. I would love to meet a .NET dev that was just like me, love fights and hated collared shirts, right? Like,
Well, I don't
like
know
we
if I
just
can
gotta
find
kind
you
of
that.
like
But for
I found
instance,
they were talking about polos today, and I just felt a part of my soul die at work today, right?
I'm glad I
So
didn't. I usually I sometimes I wear a collared shirt on this, but it's like a tech collared shirt, like it's a like microfiber. I'm glad I didn't wear a collared shirt. I would have been
like,
blasted.
no, don't do this to me. I was like,
Yeah.
there's like,
So
why? I just like, man.
um so let me just drop names. Let me just name a couple of folks that I know that I think you if you don't follow them or if you're not aware of them, it would be great, right?
Sure.
So David Fowler. Do you know David?
Yep, no,
Yeah.
David.
So he's one of the main architects for .NET Core, and he is black. Maria Nagaga, do you know Maria?
Nope.
Yep. So Maria Nagaga is on the .NET team, and she's been very vocal in how we can get young people into .NET, right? Talking about
Yeah,
students, talking about whatever. So definitely,
that's not the problem right there. You just said it. People talk about students. Like, no, that's comfort zone right there. We want to go into high schools, want to go into colleges. Nah, go to the Boys and Girls Club, go to the YMCA's. Like that,
yes,
like JavaScript is very much like, no, we're boots on ground. We're going to meet people where
yeah,
they're at. Not we're going to wait till they get to a certain level that we're comfortable with, then try to meet them there. Like it's really like, because of .NET as an enterprise, the only time you really even get exposed to .NET is when you want to work, right?
yeah.
So like these college kids, they don't think about .NET until they start like their junior, senior years and they're trying to get a job, right? So how do we break that?
Yeah. It's hard. And I just realized that as I was talking this, I definitely just did the "I'm not a racist, I have black friends" thing. And that's
It's okay.
no, like no, I feel like an idiot now. Like
You
I'm just trying to
are,
name
but you're just
drop. I'm
trying
not
to
trying to name
show
drop black people I know to seem cool. But no, like I think so. How does .NET? How do we try to bring people?
.NET has to get to a point where you don't have to do that,
Yeah,
right?
well, for
Like
sure,
that.
right? But it starts somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know if you had started in tech when JavaScript still has a really bad rap, right? But there was a point in time in tech where JavaScript was untouchable. Like people didn't want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Um, like in the quote unquote Web 2.0 age when JavaScript had like no features other than like carousels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, so and out of that turned like this really really rich ecosystem of things. And I think what ended up happening is that the barrier to entry for JavaScript is very very low, right?
Yes.
So you can write JavaScript literally in Notepad.
Yeah. You can, I mean, you just need a Windows machine to write .NET, right? And
No, not anymore.
I mean, yeah, but I'm like, most people
Yeah,
have
yeah,
Windows machines, right? I know you can write on Macs now as well, and C Sharp and .NET is open source. I know that now.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
learned it like a month ago. And I was like, I might want to learn about this framework and language if I'm
Yeah.
running for it. So I understand that, but I also know that hey, yo, these like the adoption could be so much easier if because everybody buys Windows machine. A Mac is like I love my Mac. Like I will never ever
Of
say
course you do.
anything
Of
bad about Macs.
course you do.
Like you could literally like do your worst. I would still say Macs are the greatest machines on earth. But everybody's first machine usually is a Windows machine.
Sure.
What if, just like with Max, when they do with Swift Playgrounds, you guys did it with .NET, right? Like, why do I have to wait till I'm in college to see about .NET versus, like, Apple, they're always pushing Swift Playgrounds. Like,
Sure.
they push it on the iPhone, they push it on the tablet, they have a little environment on the tablet that I can play with Swift on. Like, my kids have been introduced to Swift on their own without any pushing to it because of how easy the operating system made it to be introduced to it,
Yeah.
right? Like I have one that was playing with Swift before they were playing with uh, the little block. I don't even remember what's the block coding.
Oh yeah, Scratch.
Scratch, yeah.
Yeah.
Mess around with Switch before Scratch because
Yeah.
it was like, oh, what is this? So why not do that, right? Like everybody, I like even in, the current Vets Code cohort, right? I think there's like 2 Mac users. Everybody else has a Windows machine, right? And so that means their machine already is in the Windows ecosystem. The OS is the Windows ecosystem. Visual Studio is what they would like need, and for that, right? And then, or they do Visual Studio Code for a lot of the light
Yeah.
work when it comes to .NET, right? So, or Visual Studio Code, another thing. Why is that not a part of the thing that's just built in, right?
Well, so Swami Streams is on the chat right now, and he just posed that exact question. Like putting VS Code on the Windows install. What are your thoughts about that?
That'd be a brilliant idea. That'd be like the smartest thing they've done in 15 years. Like,
I mean, yeah, I think that
I want
that's
to be
interesting.
somebody
I
better
don't
like tag or
know.
on it. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's interesting too is that like Microsoft, we've been talking about like you don't even need VS Code. Like you can write .NET in the browser. Like there's sites called like .NET Interactive
Yeah,
where you can write
I
C
saw
sharp
that.
code and hit run, and it'll run the code in the browser. So
Yeah.
that's very cool. But no, I think your point is it's very funny that you talk about barriers to entry, but then you talk about Macs. Like Macs aren't a barrier to entry for folks.
Macs are a barrier to entry. That's
Yeah.
why I brought like I love my Mac. I understand that when I was a user and I had a
Yeah.
Windows machine and then I got my first Mac, like yo, these things when it comes to development, I do not believe I'm sorry, you can't do better than Mac. However, I also understand that like that sticker price is insane. Like, and I wish it was a company that was like, yo, we're gonna make like development just as friendly as Macs and look at it from that point of view, but like we're not gonna add that crazy ass sticker price, right? Because
Yeah.
like beyond like I tell people like the Lenovo Yoga Hut is like the best non-Mac machine out there to me, right? So beyond that, like who else is doing that type of stuff, right?
I mean, I'm a
So
fanboy, but like, have you tried Surface products?
Surface what?
Surface
No.
products? No.
Negative.
Wait. Oh, so we figured it out, Jerome. You're a Microsoft hater. That's what it really
No,
is.
I love VS Code and I love GitHub, right? So
Okay.
and
Okay. But
like those like
so listen.
hate it because like I like I love VS Code. Like I feel like
Yeah.
VS Code is the best product Microsoft has dropped for like
Yeah.
ever, right? It's the best thing. And like when you guys bought GitHub, I was like, oh my goodness, they are making power moves out here,
Yeah.
right? Like the past three, I watch Microsoft and I look at like the change and transformation that Microsoft has done as a company is insane because sorry.
You're fine. It's funny because I talked to Noelle Silver. I don't know if you know Noelle. Um, she she used to work at Microsoft and now she works at an education based company, and she used to work on Alexa, and she actually like somebody came to do her AC. So like the person is basically banging against an AC like the last half of the chat. Um but yeah.
Whenever somebody shows up outside, they start losing their
Oh,
mind.
for
Right?
sure. But it's good that they bark at people they don't know, which is a whole different thing.
Yes, I can do that. But yeah, like the past 5 years of just watching Microsoft has been nothing short of amazing, right? Like you guys own work beyond the machine, right? If Microsoft was able to get the work desktop or the work laptop right to the levels of MacBook Pro,
Oh, you don't know. You don't. So like, listen.
I
I'm
don't feel
sorry.
like Microsoft Surface is there yet. Like
Sir,
I've not heard
have
anyone.
you played around with the Surface Book?
No, I have not, but I don't
Then
think it's gonna.
you can't make a
You're
statement.
right.
You can't make a statement like
You
there's no
are
comparison to
right,
MacBooks. Look, I
but
agree with you.
I'm gonna die on this hill today. You're absolutely right, but I'm still like
Sure,
I
sure.
don't know. I'm gonna have to find. I'll. I don't know how to get. I don't. I just. It's
So
so
here
hard
we
to
go.
even find
Let
a
me just
Microsoft Surface machine.
I feel like I feel like this conversation is great, but I want to leave us some time to talk about Vetsu code.
Yeah.
But so one of the things that I would like, so I want to have a conversation with you again about, and I want to talk more specifically about how .NET can make Jerome happy, because I feel like if Jerome's happy, there's probably other people like Jerome that are also happy. So let's have a conversation later about that. But I want to talk about vets who code.
Hard question. Like, though, that's such a simple like answer.
No, it's not.
Uh,
No, it's
yes,
not.
it is. Get rid of the antiquation. Like, that's it. Like,
Well, I
especially
can't I can't like snap my fingers like Thanos and make a bunch of 20-year-old white guys disappear.
no. I don't want them to disappear. I want the barrier for the respect and the opportunity to disappear.
Yeah.
They should they should be heralding. Like, you got 20 years in the game and you can't say you brought any that no one's around and has been a rock star. Like, Billy Hollis was one of my mentors, a .NET guy, UX, Microsoft MVP. He is like, you're talking to me, and he was my mentors. He's a big UX guy, though, right? That's how we connected. If you've been in the game 20 years and you can't say that, then it's a flaw on your behalf,
Oh,
right?
for sure. Like I think there's I think like let's talk more about this in the future because I love having this conversation because I have a feeling I can convince you that .NET is cool. But I don't have the amount of time I think I need to do that because I think that you're a bit stubborn, which is fine. I'm stubborn too. I want to talk about vets who code, right? Um, Obviously, as somebody who was in the military, and when you got out, you're like, okay, well, my options for employment are very small, and if I don't want to be like in some, if I don't want to have to carry a gun as a part of my job, I can work like retail, which, I've said this to my friends, I've said this to colleagues, like that's garbage, right? Like everybody should have an opportunity, whether they're graduating from college or getting out of the military or whatever. They should have an opportunity to do what they want. And it seems to me like you found something that was interesting to you and then it turned into a passion. And it seems to me, based on what I've been reading about vets who code, is that you saw a similar thing for yourself and you wanted to get that opportunity in the faces of other folks like you. Fair?
Yeah, that's absolutely 100%. I mean, I don't view myself as some like special like case when it comes to tech. I feel like it's, anyone can do this if they want to do the work. Like, first and foremost, veterans are, you know, the biggest issue with veterans is the stigma because people look at the veteran scope from the Vietnam War era versus post 9/11 veteran. Post
Sure.
9/11 veteran is a critical thinker through and through. Everybody's a leader on every level. One, two, veterans are made for this type of work because we have you ever read an SOP before? Like death by PowerPoint, SOPs, dry documentations. Like we live for this. Like we have been already been through the meat grinder on the driest documentation on on earth. I remember like this thick book at the gate guard that we had to read over the course of 12 hours just to memorize stuff my first year in the military. And it was horrible. But I read it, getting like an 80% on like on the test, 86% on the test, because like I knew all this stuff. Like, even now, like I'm going through some O'Reilly books, I'm going through the JavaScript definitive guide right now, and it's so dry. And I'm like, I'm loving this. Like, oh my goodness. Let me put on a cup of tea and just like marinate over this for like 4 hours, right? So that like every veteran is like this, right? We love to keep our heads down. We love that work, but we're great communicators. Even like great example, current cohort, Kanban and branching has been like it's been the easiest time I've ever seen like them get Kanban and branching because Kanban is essentially what they've already done in the military just under a different name, and the branching and being able to communicate on a GitHub repo and talk to each other and like do PRs and things of that nature. Like that's we have a term called like shoot, move, communicate, but now it's just code, move, and communicate for these guys now, right, guys and girls. And we have one lady, she has to be older than me, but she is learning. She shared her screen with me. She had like 40 tutorials up, and she's all the YouTube videos. Like she is immersing herself in this
Yeah.
culture, right? Like, because she's not taking anything as an answer. Like she talks to her mentor every day. Um, they're willing to do the work, right, for the goal, which is amazing, which you can't really which is a rarity to find such a like high percentage of people that are really willing to, as I like to say, embrace the suck of learning a new skill. Like, there's people, adults are very adverse to learning new skills. Like,
Oh,
adults are
for sure.
very, like, children love learning new things.
Yeah.
Adults, because adults, like, part of value of being an adult is competency in what you do. So adults don't like looking stupid. That's part of the like ego of being an adult, right? Don't like looking dumb. Don't like asking for help. Don't like feeling incompetent, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
as a result, adults, especially when you get past like a certain age, they don't want to learn new things. But see, these, like, to watch people can like fall on their face over and over again and fail and ask questions and fail less or fail in different ways and ask more questions. It's just so refreshing when when I'm working with the veterans, and I'm doing like I have so many stories, like guys like Jacob Oakley, who he comes from an HR background in the military, and he was straight up the worst like front end developer I ever met in my life. Like, it was like, yo, I don't know if this guy has it,
You
and
haven't
he's
seen my stuff. If you see my stuff, you'll disagree that he's the worst ever.
yeah, but he's not anymore, and he's so good. Like, he heads up our code pen team, and he just crushes it. Like, his first year, every month we were winning pick pen award, and like half of them, Chris Hoyer himself was picking, right? And when you look at it, and you're like, yo, this dude was so bad. I have to have a one-on-one with him about this. Like, he's my first one-on-one ever. And I was like, yo, like, you have to shore your game up, step your game up right here, here, and here. And here's some resources that we're going to do. Like, it was the equivalent of a PIP conversation. And it's so funny because he loves like that story now. And he's always trying to get me to move to Oklahoma. And I'm like, I am never going to move to Oklahoma, like, ever. He's like, yo, we have a director of development position open. You'd be great for this. Like, you
Yeah.
should move here. He sends me houses on Zillow, Oklahoma all the time. I'm like, no, never move to
He wants to live there though. He wants to live there.
Yeah,
No offense to anybody from Oklahoma, but I don't know why we live there.
I wouldn't
But
go there.
so
Like, I'm
there's a
sorry.
couple of things that you said that are very interesting to me, right? The way you talk about vets who code, and vets in general who get into tech, is very similar to how I hear people talk about career changers, right? So say for instance maybe you work in HR, you work in marketing, or you work at some other discipline, and then you get into tech, and there's no stigma there. Like, oh, you're a career changer, that's awesome, whatever. But for whatever reason, you just explained vets getting into tech the exact same way that career changers talk about getting into tech, but there's a stigma with it. And I think,
Because I
yeah,
can talk about, I mean, because the jobs, when you say marketing to tech, that makes sense, right? But if I said this person used to work on C-130s, and you're like,
oh,
what
for
the hell is
sure.
a C-130, or a tanker? Like, so that's where the stigma, like, in the end, like, Jacob's one of the stories where his story makes sense to civilians. I carried an M4 and M9 every day for work.
Yeah,
My first year was on the gate guard. My second year, I was in Iraq doing patrols. It's a different type of communication and storytelling for that, right? So that's where those stigmas come from. Those stigmas, and the human American civilians are on average 6 to 8 degrees removed away from a veteran, which means like if you go into your culture, like your friends, your communities, like somebody's like auntie's
yeah, yeah, yeah,
daughter,
yeah,
cousin,
yeah.
like, yeah, is dating a Marine, and he's crazy as hell. So, but he's a Marine. So, like, that's the story. So, no one really understands how the military works, especially in San Francisco, right? San Diego, San Francisco, you guys have like a nice Navy presence around there, and Fleet Week, but only like Fleet Week's usually the only time you really see military around there. They're getting drunk, right? Because they've been on a boat with no alcohol for six
Yeah,
months.
like, so,
And like that's where that storytelling. And, there are organizations out there that are trying to do that work. Like breaking those stigmas, like people thinking that, oh, veterans are only good at taking orders, or, oh,
sure.
veterans are only good at doing this, that, and the third, or they, like they all have PTSD and stuff. Like,
Yeah,
they're there, but there's also organizations that are buying into those for the opposite reasons because it makes them money, right?
Yeah,
Like, the grunt styles of the world. I'm not hating on grunt style. I love those guys, but they do a different type of veteran AF that I do. Like, I'm
sure.
veteran AF, but I'm veteran AF in the idea that like I believe in I believe in that America is great and that we have to do the things that continue to show our greatness by being more inclusive and making communities better, right? We have to reconcile with our past for a better future. Like that is my idea of what makes America great. The ability to say that compassionately. Whereas,
Yeah,
they're like, let's shoot things with bazookas. And I'm all for shooting things with bazookas, but
yeah,
like I'm never gonna videotape it, right? That's
sure.
just not my veteran AF story,
Yeah.
right? So
Well,
like that's the duality of it, right?
yeah, I
Extreme
think
point.
yeah, there's a couple of things to unravel there for sure. I think one of the things that like fixing the stigma is very important. But I also think that I think there's opportunity for education for people that are in tech and outside of tech, I guess, as well. That people inside, like people from the military, people are veterans, they have a lot of skills that are extremely valuable to tech. So I guess one of the questions is, so Shwami Streams asked this question in the chat, like, how can people that are in tech and vocal in tech, like if you're a blogger or a streamer or you speak, like, how can we promote Vets Who Code and how can we get the message out there, right? Because I think unfortunately, like there's this hero worship in tech community, right? Unfortunately, and I think it's Scott says it pretty well, right? Scott Hanselman. He's like, if I can help someone with my status, that's awesome, right? And so, what can we do? Like, I'm not saying that I'm an influencer by any means, but I know people who are, and I think a lot of people will watch this and say, "Oh, well, how can I help?" So, how can we help?
If we're talking about just vets who code,
Or
follow us
just in
on here.
general, it doesn't have to be
You
Vets Who
share our
Code,
stories.
but I
If we're
think the
talking about
concept.
veterans, if we're talking about veterans,
Yeah.
if you're a social Microsoft has a veterans group. See if you can embed with one, or see if there's ever if there's opportunity to mentor a veteran, right?
Yeah.
Like talk we don't bite most of the time, so just talk to a veteran, just taking that opportunity to and I know that's scary. Like as an adult, we really suck at making friends when you become
Oh
an adult.
man.
When you're a
Yes.
kid, it was so easy. Now as an adult, it's like,
Yeah.
what do we talk about? Like,
Same
I
reason why
don't
we don't like change.
know.
The
Yeah.
same reason.
So that's what if you want to help veterans, first we have to like destigmatize and humanize veterans. And so in the end, I think that's why I like doing shows like this because people do not see veterans like me. We're not for political. Well, when you think about politics, I'm not the guy that they bring up at the table, start talking about veteran issues. I don't have the look that's needed to do that, and I'm very happy for that, right? Because that's another issue that we have as veterans is that very outside of Tulsa and a few other veterans, they really don't showcase the diversity or the inclusiveness of the military. Um, for us, we're guys and girls. We just friend us on not you can do Facebook, Twitter, talk to
Yeah.
us when you see us. Go to the Veterans Day thing. Like, don't be like, well, I'm not a veteran, so I'm not going to go there.
Yeah.
Like, go and talk to those. Like, talk to them. Ask them their embed them in your teams.
Yeah.
Ask them to join your committees. Like,
And I'll
ask them to
just
join committees that aren't veteran committees. That is great. Like, if you could get that's the biggest most companies they just put all the veterans in a silo, but then they don't put the veterans on other things, right? Like I'm a big front end UX UI web accessibility guy. Put me in those rooms too, right? I'm very opinionated about those. Like don't just put me in the veteran room, put me in the JavaScript room, put me in the front end room, put me in the UX room, put me in the UI room, put me in the barbecue room, right? Put me in the
well,
pets room. Like if you put me in the barbecue like right now, well yeah, the cooking room, right? Like find a thing that we connect on beyond that. Like most veterans I know, they love cooking, they love grilling. So like me, I'm literally waiting next week I am doing a whole 7 days of pork belly recipes that I'm literally been planning and mapping and said I bought 6 pounds
why did I
and
just find out about this?
You don't follow me on Twitter enough.
I
I
do.
said
I
it
guess
like a
I
week
guess
ago.
I do follow you on Twitter, but I guess I'm not aware of it because
Yeah, I'm doing.
I would have a
I'm
live stream on my TV just the entire time, just watching
I'm
you.
doing 7 days of pork belly like recipes, and I'm doing like I found a kind of breakfast like stir fried rice way of doing things with pork belly. So it's like a Japanese Korean like mesh like for breakfast. I have some lunch dishes. I have a bunch of dinner dishes. I have a Mexican pork belly dish that I'm doing. Like I'm literally gonna take a pound of it and like cook it for like at 280 for like I think 4 hours, and then the
Oh,
last like 20 minutes I'm gonna sear it, and then I'm gonna chop it up really fine so it's gonna have like this really crispy texture with
yeah,
the fat. Like dude, I'm literally like I'm right. So I have that's my thing, right? I like to do have a book about fat, salts, and sweets. I have a book on culinary science. Like
yeah,
that's the thing I like to read about when I'm not looking at the at code, right? Or I'm
sure,
not helping people with code. So that's like every Saturday I'm doing wild stuff like that, and like because it's coronavirus, I have been cooking crazy
yeah,
dishes. Right? So things like that, like what's your Slack channel, like have a show and tell, and pick a veteran, like show us what you like to cook, like show us a thing,
yeah,
like or something funny like an MRE meal, right? Show like I know some veterans that can take things from MREs and actually like do like 5-star cooking with those things. Like I have met
all
in
right.
person those horrible
I'm
things, like
sold, man. I'm sold. So I think that the short answer to the question is, just familiarize yourself with the community and don't try to don't try to blow the movement up. Like don't try just try to help individuals. Is kind of what it makes you're talking about, right? Which I think is a
yeah, I
great
mean,
idea.
veterans are still people. We
Yeah.
still like video games. Like, if you
Yeah.
have an esports team or a video game competition, like let the vets play like Call of Duty against each other and watch them like click up. Or the Army versus Navy game, go like, oh man, you go to like your organization's Army versus Navy game and just people watch. It's the funniest thing on earth, right? Like watching people like go Army beat Navy and the rivalry that goes on with this and like our cultures. Like you're gonna watch like the prisoner exchange. Like when football comes back, you'll watch the prisoner exchange of the Army and Navy, and you're like, wait, y'all had prisoners? Like, no,
Yeah.
they're not really prisoners.
Yeah.
But like, it's just a wild. Like the culture is so like the culture when you're on the outside looking at it, it could be such a fun experiment, right?
Yeah.
So just invite those cultures into your communities, right? Or like dip in and like just look through the window every once in a while and ask questions. They're still people.
Yeah, it's so I'm just gonna like, and we gotta wrap up soon because yeah, I think that we've been chatting about all sorts. I could talk to you for hours, I think, but I think so. Here's my general thought because I have some biases myself, right? So my honest opinion is that we're very this country especially is very guilty of like military worship, and I don't think it's a good thing. I think that we worship the system and not the people. And I would love to get your thoughts just on what we can do as tech influencers because I think a lot of people are in similar boats as me. Like I'm not a huge fan of what the military does, but I think it's necessary and I think the people are doing a really important thing.
All right. Well, I mean, you just said it like right there perfectly. Like, it's not about the system, it's about the people,
Yeah.
right? Like, I am just a person who's doing it, that did their job, and now I'm trying to move on to the next phase of my life. Is it a part of me? Yes. Is it a part of my identity? Yes. But being black is a part of my identity. I
Sure.
can't take away either one of those, right? But like I said, in the end, I am still a person. I still, like I said, we just had a conversation on like cooking pork belly. Like if you like just think about if you let those biases get ahead of you, you're like, oh shit, like, I didn't know this dude loved like cooking like that,
No.
right? I didn't love or like was excited like about pork belly and being able to like find like I'm trying to oh he's trying to do 18 different dishes with this. This is insane,
Yeah.
right? So like how like that's how we grow. is people, right? Like we focus on the person, not on the system. Like
Sure.
systems is how we implement change, but people is how we implement growth,
Yeah.
right? So
That's great.
I
Like
just made that part up. I'm gonna write that down.
that's good. No, this is going to be recorded, so you don't need to write it down. You can watch the recording
Oh, yeah,
later.
yeah, I'm
You'd be
gonna definitely
like,
take
I
on
know
that.
I said something really good there. What did I say?
Yeah, that came off the dome. I gotta remember that.
Yeah. No, I think it's very spot on. I think systems in general are not good, right? I think most systems are there to emphasize the strengths of the system but downplay the weaknesses of the system. Like we talked about .NET for 30 minutes and we talked about how the .NET system itself, like the ecosystem and the community, like it's not the biggest weakness is something we never talk about is why don't we get particular people of different demographics, not just color, not just race, but like people in military, people that are
Let's
career changers. But
let's reframe that.
okay,
I think the dogma or the worship of systems is the problem, right?
sure.
Systems like if we looked at, well, let's talk about racism, right? If we look at systemic racism and we were like, you know
We don't
what,
got all
it's
day, Jerome.
institutionalized. Like, yeah, but it's
Yeah,
institutionalized. So we're seeing it that's not working. So let's rapidly change this, right? Like
yeah,
just imagine if we looked and treated systems the way we look and treat bad code, or how we're supposed to look and treat bad code, where
sure.
we isolate it, refactor it, and fix it when we still keep the good stuff, right?
Yeah,
Would that not be amazing? Or like
yeah.
you could just comment it out and never touch it
You
again.
ship it. What do you do when you see bad code? You ship it, right? No, it's very spot on, right? And like I don't like I have a very hard time talking about racism because of the way I look. But I think
See, that's the thing. You're supposed to be the person to talk about it
oh for
because
sure. No, like
we
look,
can't solve it without you.
let me be
So
clear. I'm very vocal, right? Like I walk around with Black Lives Matter masks. I wear shirts. Like I've walked in protests. Like my wife and I are very serious about it. I have a hard time talking about it because I feel like the second I talk about it, people roll their eyes. And I know that's part of my bias, but I work through it.
no, that's because they look at it as like virtue signaling, right? Which is
Sure,
the
of course.
like it's the dumbest. Right? We've made up things like cancel culture and virtue signaling. Cancel culture is dealing with consequences for your actions. It's
Sure.
not cancel culture. It is called a consequence. Like your parents know that, your grandparents know that. Like what is this? Like and we were the first to create a cancel culture. Like during the Vietnam War, like Vietnam veterans are still mad at like certain celebrities for things like for trying for speaking out against it, calling them baby killers and stuff. So like cancel culture isn't even a millennial thing, right?
Yeah.
People like the Dixie Chicks, right? We were kids when they canceled the Dixie Chicks, right?
Yeah, I
But
remember like that I did not
yeah,
remember that. I just yeah, that's great.
yeah, Dixie Chicks, like they said something that people didn't like, and you never heard of them again, right?
Yeah. No, it's so true. And they were so popular and they made
they
one comment
were
about the president
and they were
and
gone.
they were
Like
gone. Yeah.
they might as well have been wiped off the face of the planet,
Yeah.
right? So like we didn't invent cancel culture that was handed to us, and it's just dealing with consequences.
Well, I think the medium
Virtue
changed.
signaling, no, it hasn't. Just the speed of it has
Oh yeah,
changed.
exactly. That's what I mean, right? Like somebody can go from the most popular person on the planet to canceled in like 5 minutes,
Yes, well, that's
and there's
scary.
no coming back after you're canceled. There's
There is if you do it right. And the thing is, being adults, we have egos. People don't like to like humble themselves and people don't like to apologize. People don't like to say publicly, I was wrong. I'm an imperfect human. I am still learning. Let me, I am going to, while continuing to do the good work I'm doing, I am also going to make a concentrated effort to talk to people and become a better person on this front, right?
sure.
Like I always tell people, like, have you followed a person who's underrepresented in tech today,
Yeah.
right? Have you followed a woman? Have you followed a trans person? Have you followed someone or anyone LGBTQIA? Or have you followed anyone who is black or Latina or Latin or Latino? I try to say Latinx, but it says only three. There's a study that says only 3% of them actually identify with that, and
Yeah.
they prefer Latina, and Latino. It's like, all right, let's call them what they prefer,
Look,
right?
I got a hard time with it. My wife's Puerto Rican. Like I don't know what to say, so I just say Hispanic, and my wife is like, "No, that's not right
No,
either." I'm like,
that's not right.
I got nothing. I got nothing. I
If you
married you,
know,
so that means I'm cool, right? No.
no. If you like, I would call her Puerto Rican because I know, oh, you're Puerto Rican, so you're Puerto Rican, like, because you told me. But like, that's we have to be like, doing this work is a lot like it's a lot of fear with this work, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to be wrong more times than right, and I think that's a scary part of being an adult as well, right? Kids have, we teach a kid to fall on a bike. I mean, to ride a bike, they have to fall down over and over again before they get it right, right? When you become an adult, you get afraid. I don't know if it's the old age and the bad knees or something, but you get afraid of falling down on those bikes, right?
Well,
So
you just I think as you get older, you realize that how fragile you are, right? Like they say this all the time. Like as you get closer to death, you understand it more, right? Like you understand that. Like when you're a kid, like you got years, but like when you're in your 40s and 50s and 60s, you're like, oh shit, this is gonna happen any day now. And then like over the course of time, like how many times have you caught yourself being like, you're having a conversation with someone and they're like, yeah, that was like 2 or 3 months ago. You're like, no, like last week. No, it was 2 or 3 months ago. No, last week. Like I was talking
I'm like,
about, so I have a 4 and a 2-year-old, and I was talking about something with my wife, and it was something my kid did, and she's like, that was 2 years ago. I'm like, no, just happened. She's like, no, 2 years ago. I'm like,
I've been there. You're like, oh man, like
yeah.
you're old. Like, what happened to those past 2 years?
I don't know, because I remember the stuff that happened in those 2 years, but like, I think, like,
It's like time compresses as you
yes,
get older.
exactly. As you get like,
So,
I think it's very fair. Like as you get older, you accrue more time, so your brain compresses a lot of it. Like any good algorithm, right? Like you compress stuff so you can fit more of it in. But what that means is that if you have point A and point B and you compress it, it feels
that is a really good analogy for memory. I like that. I'm gonna rewatch this and take notes.
yeah. Well, it's not. I can say one or two good things in one of these streams. So, um, and I think one of the biggest things I want to take out of this entire conversation is that, like everything in the world, it's really, really important to consider that there are people that are different than you or different than everybody you know. And just because they're different doesn't mean that they're not capable of the same things as you, whether that be
Yeah,
in tech or whether that be in whatever, right? And I think your exercise in focusing on veterans is very, to be honest, like I didn't know a ton about vets and figuring out, like I just always assumed that vets got good jobs because that's what we after they get out, because that's what we always talk about, right? We talk about getting vets good jobs. But
yes, but think about it as
firsthand from what you're
job.
saying, sorry, let me finish. Like what you're saying is that no, like we get retail jobs or we get jobs that involve carrying guns, and that's something that needs to change. And I think if we as the tech community can be more open, like look, tech isn't going away as a career, so it would be in our best interest for almost every person that comes out of the military that's interested, they should take that job. They should learn tech, because otherwise they might go into a field where they might get eliminated. Like maybe they're going into a manufacturing job or a warehouse job, and unless you are a warehouse job and you work at Amazon, like your job, like who knows where it's gonna go.
I mean, even
So
if you're at Amazon, what are you
yeah,
talking about? Like there would be robots taking over those jobs soon. I had Paul Ford and I. We had a conversation about this just this week, and we were like, tech is the last white collar skill based job in on the planet, right? It's the last one you don't have to go to college for,
yeah,
but you can acquire the skills for rapid upward mobility if you put in the work.
yeah,
You know, it's amazing. It's the last one that exists, the last frontier, right? So, and that's why one of the reasons why I focus so much on coding, because I know that my community has that capacity to put in the work. They're accustomed to the long nights and weekends and stuff to learn the skills to pay the bills. So I just want to help them the same way it's helped me and keep moving forward. So yeah, to that extent, I think tech has the opportunity to play a bigger part of it. And like, that's why I love open source, right? Open source has that capacity. Like the one thing that has improved open source in the past, like I would say 6 years from when I started to now, is the documentation. And like my heart goes out to the people at Mozilla, because those like the Mozilla docs are some of the best docs
Yeah.
on the planet. Webpack's docs are amazing. Even like when I'm going through this .NET stuff, the .NET docs, they're like people are now starting to care about the things that they write. It used to be when I first started, at least, it felt like no man's land a little bit. So I
Oh
know
yeah.
prior to me, it felt like to other people just coming through, it felt like no man's land, right?
Oh, for sure. I think that's one of the barriers to entry, right? Like if there's not good docs, no one is gonna adopt, unless your thing is the only thing to adopt, right?
Yeah.
So I think docs are very important because not everybody learns the same way. Like you mentioned, talk books, for instance, right? I'm in the same boat. Like I cannot read a book this thick. Like I will not read it, right? But I will read docs, like pages and pages and pages of docs.
Because it
I,
just feels so seamless,
I,
right?
it's just how I learn, and I think a lot of people, and some people like they learn better by watching people code on stream, or they watch YouTube videos, or they read blogs, or like the more content that's out there, the more you bring down the barrier for people to get into whatever you're doing, right? And I think it's important. Is like bringing down the barriers, like not just with vets and not just with people of color or anything, but just like people in general, right? If you want people to adopt whatever you're trying to sell, you need to have it be accessible to everybody. And I think open source, to kind of circle all the way back around to open source, is like that's how you make things approachable for people. Like, there's lots of things in the open source space that have made it easy for people to learn new things. And, that whole cliche statement, like standing on the backs of giants, right, or shoulders of giants. It's very, very important to remember that when we do the work in open source, it's because somebody before us thought it was a good idea to do this. And, I want to end kind of on just one of the things that I like to ask at the end of our talks is that, you know, if you can describe open source in one word, what would it be? And I have a feeling, I have a hard time. You're probably gonna have a hard time using one word.
Mhm.
No,
Liberating.
liberating.
Yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
mean, without the barrier, I mean, especially right now, like there's no better time to become a developer, and the uh, because of open source, it's the lack of barriers to to these skills. So not only help you get jobs, but help you like create and use your imagination and creativity in different ways, right? So it's liberating. Like it's the new freedom, right? You can get a domain or a code pen or a Replit, or and you can just build your
Yeah,
little part of your little paradise, right? So it's liberation.
that's awesome. That's awesome. I feel like I'm ending this way too short, but Jerome,
I know, right? I'm like,
well, we've been talking for an hour and a half, and we can just keep talking. So let's do this. Let's
I have
talk. Let's
work to do.
Yeah, let's talk. I do too. I do too. Let's talk in the future because I really want to convince you about .NET, but I also want to just talk to you in general about how we can do better in tech, about getting people into tech, people that are different than me, because that's what I want. I love sitting in a room and not everybody looks like me. So I think that's the only way that I can really phrase it. So again, Jerome, thank you so much for your time. This was awesome, and
Thank you for
I hope
having me.
everybody got a good glimpse of what Jerome is doing, and how, as open source contributors, we can make the world a better place. Thank you, everybody.
See you guys later.